Hi guys, it's me again. This time I'm going to be bringing to you the story of the Garden of Gethsemane. Now, I had just read something to you about Jesus with his Passover meal, about him doing the Lord's Supper with his disciples, about Judas going out to betray Jesus, about Jesus washing the disciples' feet. And now we're going to learn about Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane. So the story I'm going to read about you is called A Dark Night in the Garden. And it comes from Luke chapter 22, Mark chapter 14, and John chapter 18. The wind was picking up now, blowing clouds across the moon, shrouding the garden in darkness. "Stay up with me?" Jesus asked his friends. They said yes and waited under the trees, but they were tired and soon fell asleep. Jesus walked ahead alone into the dark. He needed to talk to his heavenly Father. He knew it was time for him to die. They had planned it long ago, he and his Father. Jesus was going to take the punishment for all the wrong things anybody had ever done or ever would do. "Papa, Father," Jesus cried, and he fell to the ground. "Is there any other way to get your children back, to heal their hearts, to get rid of the poison of sin?" But Jesus knew there was no other way. All the poison of sin was going to have to go into his own heart. God was going to pour into Jesus' heart all the sadness and brokenness in people's hearts. He was going to pour into Jesus' body all the sickness in people's bodies. God was going to have to blame his son for everything that had gone wrong. It would crush Jesus. So here he is praying. And he asked a few of his disciples to come stay and pray with him. But see what happens? It says they were tired and they fell asleep. But there was something else, something even more horrible. When people ran away from God, they lost God. It was what happened when they ran away. Not being close to God was like a punishment. Jesus was going to take that punishment. Jesus knew what that meant. He was going to lose his Father, and that, Jesus knew, would break his heart in two. Violent sobs shook Jesus' whole body. Then Jesus was quiet, like a lamb. "I trust you, Papa," he said. "Whatever you say, I will do." He is praying and surrendering his will to God. He is going to do this willingly. Suddenly, through the trees, a glitter of starlight flashed off steel. Into the quiet garden came whispers, muffled voices, clanking metal, and the sound of boots marching. Jesus stood up. He woke his friends. "Now is the time," he said gently. "Everything that was written about me, what God has been telling his people all through the long years, it's all coming true." And into the night, with burning torches and lanterns, with swords and clubs and armor, they came, an army of soldiers. Judas led them straight to Jesus so they would arrest him. Jesus was waiting for them. Remember, in the scriptures it says that Judas betrays him with a kiss. So here's Jesus and his followers. Hopefully you can see it. There's Judas with a group of men. Peter leaped up, took a sword, and tried to defend Jesus. He sliced off a guard's ear. Jesus immediately touched the guard and healed him. "Peter," he said, "this is not the way." Peter didn't realize that no army, no matter how big, could ever arrest Jesus. Not unless Jesus let them. Then Jesus, who had never done anything except love people, was arrested as if he were a criminal. Jesus' friends were afraid, so they ran away and hid in the dark shadows. The guards marched Jesus off and took him to the leaders. These are the religious leaders. The leaders put Jesus on trial. "Are you the Son of God?" they asked. "I am," Jesus said. "Who do you think you are, to call yourself God? You must die for calling yourself the Son of God." Only the Romans were allowed to kill prisoners, so the leaders made a plan. "We'll tell the Romans this man wants to be our king. and then they will crucify him. But it would be all right. It was God's plan. It was for this reason that I was born into the world, Jesus said. And so here's a picture of Peter running. Remember, Peter is the disciple. He speaks before he thinks. He is brash, and he's just sometimes outspoken and does stuff. And so he wanted to defend Jesus. And so there he goes running. But it wasn't the right thing to do at that moment. And even in that moment, Jesus says, this is not what we're going to do right now. I need to do this, and this is what's going to happen. So here he is. They take him, and now they're going to lead him on trial. He's going to go before the religious leaders. They're going to talk with him. They're going to mock him, make fun of him. They're going to take him before Pontius Pilate. He's going to be put on trial there too. And they're going to make those decisions on whether or not he should live or he should die. Now, we are going to stop there because the next story is about how Jesus, after being put on trial, is put to death. But let's look at a couple things from our Storybook Bible, okay? So it says they go off to a garden because Jesus wants to pray. So here he is praying. Here's the disciples sleeping. But here's some things that we need to know in the garden. Remember, Jesus is both fully human and fully God. So that means that he's going to have the emotions of a human being. We can have all kinds of emotions, can't we? Jesus understands and knows what must be done, but that doesn't make it any easier. He is emotional, and he's praying to the Lord. Lord, if it's your will, take this cup from me. If it's your will, let something else happen. However, he knows that what he must do is die, because you know what's worse than all the things that he's feeling? What's worse is when people run away from the Lord. It's worse when people have lost God and don't know him and know who he is. When Jesus does this and is willing to go and die, that means that anybody can be close to God. But in order to do that, Jesus also must be separated from God for a short period of time, because he's then going to take all that yuckiness, all of that sin, all of that feeling of everything that's wrong with the world. He's going to take that on him, and that's why it will break his heart and God's heart, because they know what they have to do in order to save all of us. But he's willing to do that because it says that God loved the world so much that he gave us his one and only Son. Jesus had to be willing to do it. So he had to be perfect and whole and not sin. And he also had to be willing to do it. It says, like an animal or a lamb being led to slaughter. They are passive. They're not fighting. Jesus is willing to go do this so that the people that he created, that God created and loves, could be able to have a life together with them. So he is sad. He cries. He mourns. But then he is willing, he submits, and he surrenders his will to the Lord. Now, he's doing this because he knows that the time is near. Judas went and got those people, so now they're coming to arrest him. So here they are. They're coming to arrest him. I'm sure the disciples are scared. They don't understand what's going on. Jesus has been telling them for some time now that he was going to be arrested and crucified, and the time was going to be near where he wasn't going to be on earth with them much longer. And so they come and they're scared, but Peter, outspoken Peter, rushes to defend his Lord. And maybe his ideas were noble, but it's not what they needed at that time. And he goes and runs and he cuts somebody's ear off. And you know, even in this moment before Jesus is going to be arrested, he still performs a miracle. He puts his hand over the soldier and heals the soldier's ear, and it comes back and it's normal. And he tells Peter that this needs to take place and happen. We are not going to do it like this. And like it says, Peter didn't realize that no army, no matter how big, could ever arrest Jesus. Not unless Jesus let them. Jesus needed to go willingly, and he was willing to go. Now, it says that Jesus is put here on trial. He stands before, they say, the leaders. It means the religious leaders, the ones who'd been plotting to kill him in the first place. He's standing before these leaders because they're saying, you say that you're the Son of God. And Jesus says, I am who you say I am. And they're like, but Son of God, that's blasphemy. Nobody can say that they're Son of God except the Messiah. And Jesus is like, I am the Messiah. They don't want to know that. They don't want to admit that. They just know that they are not okay with what he's doing and they want him gone. And they think that the best way to make these things disappear is to kill him. But they are not allowed to do that because they're under Roman authority. And so they are going to take it to the Roman authority. And if they say that Jesus says that he's their king, because now what they're doing is they're taking scripture and messing it up to get their way, that if Jesus is their king, then that's a threat to Roman rule. And then the Romans will go ahead and get rid of them. So Jesus goes upon trial. He goes back and forth in the story. Goes back and forth between the leaders, and he's put on trial for what they want to happen. Now, Jesus answers their questions and does, but he also knows this is what needs to happen. This has to happen in order for him to die for all people. And while it may seem really hard and really sad, if we think that in all the parts of the book of the Bible has been leading up to this moment, ever since the moment that Adam and Eve sinned, God had a plan, and his plan was to save the world. And it wasn't just to save the world once over and over and over. It was to save it once and for all. When Jesus dies on the cross, no other sacrifices need to be made. Nothing else needs to be happened because Jesus, who is fully God and fully man, could take all of those things and do it one time and save all of us. And that's something that's just really amazing to think that God had all of this in place, working through the Old Testament and now into our New Testament stories, that he had a plan and a purpose. And so sometimes when we're not quite sure what's going on, we can pray to God like Jesus did and put our trust and our faith in him and know that even though it may be hard and difficult, it may break our hearts, we can trust God knowing that it's going to come out all good in the end and work out according for our good in the end, because we know that even though this was hard, that wasn't the end of it, was it? And that's why we get to celebrate Easter on Sunday. So I hope you guys have a great day, and I'll see you again soon. Bye.